May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders. Across Europe, the most feared tanks of the Second World War sit abandoned. Engines cold, crews gone, guns silent. 1,800 Tigers produced. By 1948, almost all of them had vanished. Where did they go? What the Allies did to these machines will shock you. Welcome to History of World War II. If you love forgotten military history, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what comes next. What would you do with the deadliest tank ever built? The Allies had exactly that problem in May 1945. Scattered across battlefields from Normandy to the Eastern Front, hundreds of Tiger tanks sat waiting, some intact, some burning, some abandoned in forests with full ammunition loads, some driven into rivers by retreating crews who couldn't bear to let the enemy have them. The Tiger had killed thousands of Allied soldiers. Sherman crews in Normandy, T-34 crews at Kursk, Churchill crews in Tunisia. For 4 years, this tank had been a nightmare. Now, Germany was defeated, and the Allies had a decision to make. The story of what happened next has never been fully told. To understand why the Allies treated Tigers the way they did, you need to understand what these machines represented in May 1945. Fear, pure, calculated, mechanical fear. The Tiger I weighed 57 tons. The Tiger II weighed nearly 70 tons. Both carried the legendary 88mm gun, a weapon originally designed as anti-aircraft artillery but converted into the most effective tank killer of the war. That gun could destroy a Sherman at 2,000 meters. The Sherman 75mm gun couldn't penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at any range. The mathematics were simple and brutal. If a Sherman met a Tiger head-on, the Sherman died. American tank crews knew this. British tank crews knew this. Soviet tank crews knew this. They had learned it the hard way, in burning hulls and body bags. By war's end, approximately 1,347 Tiger I tanks had been produced between 1942 and 1944. Another 492 Tiger II tanks rolled off production lines before Germany's collapse. 1,839 tanks total. The vast majority had already been destroyed in combat. Soviet anti-tank guns, American fighter bombers, British artillery, mechanical breakdowns on frozen roads, fuel starvation in the war's final weeks. But several hundred Tigers survived, and every Allied power wanted them. The race to capture Tigers began before Germany even surrendered. As Allied armies advanced across Germany in April 1945, intelligence teams followed close behind. Their mission was simple: find every Tiger, document its condition, secure it for testing. American ordnance officers spread across Germany and Austria. British intelligence units swept through northern Germany. Soviet trophy brigades moved systematically through the east. What they found surprised them. Some Tigers sat pristine in factory yards, never delivered to combat units. Others stood in repair depots, partially disassembled for maintenance that would never be completed. Still others had been abandoned beside roads, out of fuel, their crews walking toward prisoner of war camps. The variety of conditions was remarkable. Some Tigers appeared almost new, paint unmarked, tracks tight, guns still greased. These had belonged to units that surrendered intact, their commanders unwilling to destroy equipment that might buy better treatment from captors. Others showed catastrophic damage. Turrets blown completely off by internal demolitions. German crews had detonated ammunition stores rather than let their tanks fall into enemy hands. These machines were worthless for testing, but told their own story about German determination in defeat. Many Tigers bore the scars of their final battles: penetrated armor plates, track links scattered across engine decks, burn marks from engine fires, the distinctive gouges of anti-tank rounds that had finally found weak points. At testing grounds like Kummersdorf and Hillersleben, Allied investigators found something even more valuable than complete tanks: documentation, technical manuals, maintenance logs, spare parts inventories, training materials, production records, and prototypes, variants that had never reached the battlefield, experimental armor configurations, proposed modifications that existed only on paper, tank destroyers and recovery vehicles based on the Tiger chassis that were never built. The Allies had captured not just tanks, but the entire history of German heavy armor development. But moving Tigers presented an immediate problem. Unlike captured aircraft that could be flown to Allied bases, Tigers couldn't simply be driven away. Each tank consumed massive quantities of fuel. Many had mechanical problems that prevented movement entirely. Their weight exceeded the capacity of most bridges and roads. The Tiger I weighed over 50 tons. The Tiger II approached 70 tons. Moving them required specialized rail transport, heavy recovery vehicles, or extensive road preparation. In the chaos of occupied Germany, these resources were scarce. The Allied Control Commission established protocols. All German armored vehicles were to be immobilized immediately. Weapons disabled, fuel drained, crews detained for interrogation. But what to do with the tanks themselves? A debate emerged within Allied commands. Some officers argued for immediate destruction. My Sus My Sus, us, we are. We sell Sus. I'd whisk who with us. By Sus tsun so is can it. Go it's unlily I cop it's is I can really her I select I gets it read it nak get it sit it did we sit with it sits but it keeping them, even for testing, sent the wrong message. Destroy them all, melt them down. Use the steel for reconstruction. Others recognized intelligence value that couldn't be ignored. The Tiger's armor composition remained partially mysterious. Its optical systems were superior to Allied equivalents. The 88mm gun's accuracy at long range was legendary, but not fully understood. The sophisticated steering system that gave such a heavy tank surprising agility deserved study. The compromise was predictable. A small number of Tigers would be preserved for testing. The rest would be systematically eliminated. What became clear in those first weeks after surrender was that the Tiger-S legend would outlive the machines themselves. Even as they were being dismantled, their reputation continued to grow. The Americans moved first. Intelligence teams from the Ordnance Department had been studying German armor since the North African campaign. A Tiger I captured in Tunisia in 1943 had already been shipped to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. Now, with Germany defeated, additional examples would follow. At Aberdeen, engineers prepared facilities to receive the most feared tanks of the war. American testing focused on one question above all others: how do we kill these things? They already knew the answer from bitter combat experience. But they needed documentation, proof, data that would inform future tank design. Engineers positioned captured Tiger hulls at measured distances. They fired American tank guns at them. 75mm rounds from Sherman tanks, 76mm rounds from upgraded Shermans, 90mm rounds from the new M26 Pershing. The results confirmed what American tankers had learned in blood. The 75mm gun equipped on most Sherman tanks could not reliably penetrate a Tiger-S frontal armor at any combat range. Round after round struck the sloped plates and bounced away or shattered. The 76mm gun performed better but still struggled. It could penetrate at close range under ideal conditions. In actual combat, those conditions rarely existed. Only the 90mm gun on late war tanks like the M26 Pershing could confidently engage Tigers from the front. American engineers documented everything: penetration angles, velocity requirements, the effect of different ammunition types against German armor plate. These findings shaped American tank development for decades. The British had their own history with Tigers. From the first encounter in Tunisia in January 1943 to the final battles in Germany, British tank crews had learned to fear the distinctive silhouette of heavy German armor. The 88mm gun could destroy a Cromwell or Churchill at ranges where British tanks could ineffectively return fire. Entire squadrons had been wiped out in minutes by Tigers they never even saw clearly. At the School of Tank Technology and at Lulworth, British engineers conducted extensive trials on captured examples. British testing went beyond armor penetration. They disassembled entire tanks. Engines came out. Transmissions were stripped to individual gears. Suspension systems were examined component by component. British reports documented sophisticated engineering that explained both the Tiger's formidability and its mechanical complexity. The interleaved roadwheel system provided excellent ride quality over rough terrain, but mud and ice accumulated between the overlapping wheels, freezing solid in winter and immobilizing tanks that couldn't be freed without hours of labor. The Maybach engine delivered impressive power, but fuel consumption was enormous, and maintenance demands exceeded anything British tank units had experienced. At Bovington, a Tiger I captured in Tunisia became the centerpiece of British evaluation. Test drivers noted the tank's surprising maneuverability. Despite weighing over 50 tons, the Tiger could pivot in place and respond to controls with precision that seemed impossible for such a massive machine. Gunners praised the optical quality of German sights. The stereoscopic rangefinder allowed accurate fire at distances where British tanks had to estimate. The 88mm gun itself was mechanically reliable and devastatingly accurate. But British reports also highlighted problems that combat experience had already revealed. Field repairs were extremely difficult. Components that failed required specialized tools and training. The logistical burden of maintaining each Tiger was enormous. For every Tiger in combat, an entire support infrastructure was required behind the lines. The conclusion was clear. The Tiger was a formidable weapon, but not a practical one. Its tactical superiority came at an operational cost that Germany ultimately couldn't afford. The Soviet Union had faced more Tigers than any other Allied power. From Kursk in 1943 to Berlin in 1945. Soviet tank armies had fought desperate battles against German heavy tank battalions. The human cost had been staggering. Thousands of T-34s destroyed, tens of thousands of crew members killed. Soviet trophy brigades moved systematically across occupied Germany and Eastern Europe. Every Tiger they could find was marked for seizure. Intact examples were shipped to testing grounds near Kubinka, outside Moscow. Soviet testing was thorough and ruthless. Engineers didn't just fire at Tigers. They fired captured German 88mm guns at Tigers to understand exactly what vulnerabilities existed. They tested Soviet 85mm guns, 100mm guns, and the massive 122mm gun from the IS to heavy tank. They determined precise engagement distances, optimal angles, the exact velocity required for penetration at different ranges. Stalin himself took interest in German heavy tank development. Reports went directly to the Kremlin. Soviet designers were ordered to incorporate lessons learned into new projects. The IS-3 heavy tank. The T-10 post-war Soviet armor development was shaped by what engineers discovered inside captured Tigers. The Soviets also captured Tigers in unusual circumstances. In Prague, they found examples undergoing repair or modification, partially disassembled with components spread across workshop floors. In Silesia, entire training facilities fell intact, complete with Tigers used for crew instruction. Some of these machines were restored to running condition. Soviet propaganda films showed Tigers rolling through occupied Berlin, now under Red Army control. Military parades featured captured German armor driven by Soviet crews. The symbolism was deliberate. We defeated this. We mastered this. The machine you feared now serves us. But these operational examples were exceptions. Most captured Tigers were tested to destruction or scrapped. Competition emerged among the Allies for the rarest examples. Everyone wanted a late-production Tiger II. The King Tiger represented the pinnacle of German heavy tank design. Its sloped armor was even more formidable than the Tiger I. Its long 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at virtually any range. Factories and depots held partially completed hulls and turrets. Testing grounds contained prototype variants that offered insights into development paths that never reached production. The race to secure these machines reflected tensions that would define the Cold War. Soviet trophy brigades moved faster than Western authorities expected. American and British intelligence officers found that Tigers they had identified for capture had already been shipped east. Borders hadn't been finalized. Occupation zones were still being established. In this chaos, each power grabbed what it could. German tank crews and engineers complicated the situation. Some were detained for interrogation, forced to explain maintenance procedures, common failure points, combat tactics. Others volunteered information in exchange for better treatment or employment opportunities. German technical knowledge helped Allied teams operate captured Tigers. Without experienced crews, many tanks couldn't be started, let alone driven. German engineers explained the complex startup procedures, the transmission's peculiarities, the engine's demands. This cooperation produced detailed documentation, internal layouts, ammunition storage configurations, crew positions and escape routes, optical systems and fire control equipment. The sophisticated mechanisms that made the 88mm gun so deadly at range. Allied investigators also discovered the variety of Tiger variants produced during the war. While the Tiger I remained relatively consistent throughout production, late war examples showed modifications based on combat experience. Different track designs, modified vision ports, experimental armor configurations. The Tiger II revealed even more interesting developments. Early production models featured a different turret design than later versions. At Henschel facilities, Allied teams found plans for variants that were never built. But the most valuable discoveries were often the simplest. Maintenance logs. Some German units had maintained meticulous records. Every mechanical issue documented, every repair noted, every combat engagement recorded. These logs revealed the Tiger's operational reality in ways that technical specifications couldn't. Average breakdown rates, typical lifespan of major components, the enormous spare parts requirements, the fuel consumption that starved other units, the maintenance hours required for every hour of combat operation. Allied logistics officers studied these documents carefully. They understood what German commanders had learned too late. The Tiger's greatest weakness wasn't its armor or its gun. It was sustainability. Germany couldn't produce enough of them, couldn't fuel them, couldn't repair them, couldn't replace them when they were lost. The Tiger was a tactical masterpiece and an operational disaster. By late 1946, the intelligence gathering phase was complete. Dozens of Tigers had been tested, measured, photographed, and analyzed. Their secrets filled thousands of pages of technical reports. These findings influenced the next generation of Allied tank design: armor schemes, gun power, fire control systems, automotive engineering. The Tiger's legacy lived on in tanks that would never bear its name. But for the vast majority of Tigers that survived the war, a different fate awaited, one that few would witness, and fewer would remember. What happened next changed everything. By late 1945, the Allied Control Council issued clear directives. Germany could not retain any armored fighting vehicles. No exceptions, no appeals. Every tank, every armored car, every self-propelled gun would be eliminated. The Tigers preserved for testing represented a tiny fraction of survivors. Perhaps 24 machines saved from nearly 2,000 produced. The rest were marked for destruction. The process was systematic, efficient, thorough. Disposal sites were established at former military bases and training grounds across occupied Germany. Tigers arrived by rail, by recovery vehicle, by whatever means could move 50-ton machines. Some were used as targets for Allied gunnery practice. There was bitter satisfaction in this. Tank crews who had lost friends to Tigers now had the chance to fire back. They positioned captured hulls at combat ranges and practiced until the ammunition ran out. Others were simply broken up for scrap. Thick armor plates that had stopped countless Allied rounds were cut with torches and acetylene flames. Steel that had protected German crews now fed furnaces across Europe. At Bergen-Belsen in northern Germany, British forces assembled a collection of German armor for destruction. Tigers sat alongside Panthers, self-propelled guns, half-tracks, armored cars. Engineers studied the most efficient methods for rendering tanks permanently unusable. Remove the guns, drain all fluids. Disable engines, or simply demolish them with explosives. The turrets of some Tigers were blown off, creating dramatic but permanent destruction. The technique used the tank's own ammunition against it, detonating stored rounds to ensure nothing remained salvageable. In Normandy, Tigers that had been knocked out during the 1944 campaign remained where they had fallen for months after the war ended. Farmers wanted them gone. Local authorities needed roads cleared. But moving destroyed tanks was expensive and difficult. Some were buried where they sat. Bulldozers pushed earth over steel, creating mounds that would remain for decades until development required excavation. Others were dragged to collection points and scrapped. The French army briefly considered retaining German armor for their own use. The idea was abandoned when logistical reality became clear. Maintaining Tigers required German parts, German fuel, German expertise. None of these would be available. The tanks would become immobile monuments within months. Better to scrap them and use the steel for something useful. The Soviets took a different approach in their occupation zones. They destroyed many Tigers, but they also preserved significant numbers for study, display, and propaganda. Museums in Moscow and Leningrad received examples for public exhibition. Soviet citizens could see the machines their sons had died fighting. They could touch armor that had killed their husbands. They could understand what victory had cost. Some Tigers were restored to running condition for films and demonstrations. These carefully maintained examples appeared in propaganda, showing Soviet technical mastery over German engineering. But these survivors were exceptions. The majority of Tigers in Soviet hands met the same fate as those in the West. Destruction. Economic factors drove much of this process. Post-war Europe faced severe metal shortages. The thousands of tons of steel, copper, aluminum, and other materials locked in abandoned German armor represented valuable resources. Scrapping Tigers helped supply reconstruction efforts. The steel that had been weapons became bridges, buildings, railway tracks. For communities recovering from war, the arrival of scrap dealers to dismantle nearby Tigers provided employment and income during desperate times. The irony was bitter, but practical. The machines built to conquer Europe now helped rebuild it. Environmental concerns also played a role. Abandoned Tigers leaked fuel, oil, hydraulic fluid, and other contaminants. These substances seeped into soil and water. Local authorities wanted them removed from farmland, forests, and waterways. In some cases, Tigers that had been driven into rivers or lakes during combat were left in place. Recovery was too difficult, too expensive, too dangerous. Many of these underwater wrecks remain today, occasionally discovered by divers, sometimes revealed during droughts when water levels drop. silent memorials to battles fought 8 decades ago. How many tigers actually survived? By 1948, the vast majority had ceased to exist. Battlefield wrecks had been scrapped or buried. Depot stocks had been destroyed. Testing examples had been shot to pieces or cut apart for analysis. The handful preserved in museums or storage facilities represented almost everything that remained. Less than 1% of all tigers produced. Fragments of a legend that grew larger as the machines themselves disappeared. The speed and thoroughness of this elimination reflected Allied determination. Germany would never again threaten Europe with armored warfare. Every tiger destroyed was proof of that commitment. Every ton of scrapped steel was a guarantee. Unlike aircraft that could be preserved in storage or converted to civilian use, tigers had no peaceful application. They were purpose-built weapons of war. In the post-war world, there was no place for them outside museums and testing grounds. What survived was essentially random. Tanks that happened to be in the right place. Captured by forces inclined to preserve them. Overlooked during the rush to scrap everything else. Luck, not planning, determined which tigers would still exist in the 21st century. While most tigers were destroyed, a small number found their way into foreign service or long-term preservation. These survivors tell their own stories. France retains several captured tigers for evaluation and training. At Saumur, the French tank school used a tiger eye to train instructors and demonstrate German engineering to students. French engineers studied the 88mm gun, hoping to incorporate lessons into their own designs. They examined the optical systems, the fire control mechanisms, the sophisticated elements that made German tanks so effective. By the early 1950s, maintenance challenges forced France to retire these vehicles. Parts couldn't be obtained. Specialized lubricants weren't available. The tanks became display pieces rather than functioning machines. The Saumur Tiger survived. It remains on display today, one of the few complete examples in the world. Britain kept multiple tigers for continued study and museum purposes. The example at Bovington became one of the most famous surviving tigers. For decades, it sat as a static display, impressive but immobile. Then restoration began. Years of work. Sourcing parts from across Europe. Manufacturing components that no longer existed. Solving mechanical puzzles that German engineers had created decades earlier. In the 1990s, the Bovington Tiger ran again. It remains the only tiger eye in the world capable of movement. It operates rarely, each run carefully planned to preserve an irreplaceable machine. But when it moves, crowds gather. The sound of that Maybach engine, the sight of those tracks turning, the knowledge of what that tank represents, nothing else like it exists. The Soviet Union maintained the largest collection of preserved tigers. Museums across the Soviet bloc received examples. Moscow, Warsaw, Prague, Leningrad. Each displayed tigers as evidence of Soviet victory. Some were restored and displayed with combat damage visible. The message was clear. This is what we defeated. This is what we survived. Others were kept in storage facilities at Kubinka, occasionally brought out for demonstrations or historical events. Soviet access to multiple examples allowed more comprehensive study than Western allies could conduct. No country attempted to use tigers operationally after the war. Their mechanical complexity made it impossible. Fuel consumption was prohibitive. Parts requirements couldn't be met. Unlike the Bf-109 or Ru-52, which saw limited foreign service, tigers were too specialized to justify maintaining. But as decades passed, something changed. Historical awareness grew. By the 1960s, military historians and museum curators recognized that very few examples had survived. The systematic destruction of the 1940s had eliminated nearly everything. Efforts began to locate battlefield wrecks and recover tanks before they were lost completely. Tigers were pulled from swamps in Eastern Europe, recovered from forests in Russia, excavated from fields in Germany where they had been buried decades earlier. Many were incomplete. badly damaged, corroded beyond recognition. But even partial hulls had historical value. Even fragments told stories. The restoration of Tigers became a specialized field. Experts who understood German engineering of the 1940s. Machinists who could recreate components that hadn't been manufactured in 50 years. Historians who knew which details mattered and which could be approximated. Private collectors occasionally acquired Tiger components, a road wheel here, an optical sight there. Complete tanks remained extraordinarily rare and valuable. Today, fewer than 10 complete Tiger-Eye tanks exist worldwide. The Bovington example is the only one that runs. Others sit in museums across Russia, France, Germany, Britain, and the United States. Each represents not just a single tank, but the entire production run of a weapon that defined armored warfare. Several Tiger II examples also survive. The famous King Tiger at Gleize in Belgium was abandoned by its crew during the Battle of the Bulge. It remained in the village as a memorial, too heavy to move, too historically significant to scrap. Others sit at Kubinka, Fort Benning, and various European museums. Silent witnesses to the final years of the Third Reich. The scarcity of surviving Tigers has made them objects of intense historical interest. Each example is studied, photographed, measured by researchers hoping to understand details lost when the majority were destroyed. Rare components are documented whenever discovered. Periscopes, radios, ammunition racks, fire extinguishers. Every piece tells part of the story. The few Tigers that remain have become priceless artifacts. Their value is immeasurable in historical terms. They cannot be replaced. They cannot be reproduced. They can only be preserved. What does the fate of the Tiger teach us? For 4 years, this tank terrified Allied soldiers. Its silhouette meant death. Its gun meant destruction. Its armor meant invincibility. 1,839 produced. Fewer than 20 survive. The systematic elimination of 1945 to 1948 destroyed not just tanks, but history itself. Documents that might have explained design decisions were lost. Prototypes that might have revealed development paths were scrapped. Variants that might have shown what Germany planned were melted down. What remains is fragmentary, incomplete, precious. The Tiger's legend grew larger as the machines disappeared. Veterans who had faced them told stories that seemed impossible. Historians who studied them found gaps that couldn't be filled. Museums that displayed them drew crowds that never diminished. The tank that Germany built to win the war became the tank that history would never forget. Not because of what it achieved, but because of what it represented. Technological superiority that couldn't overcome industrial reality. Engineering excellence that couldn't compensate for strategic failure. Individual perfection that couldn't defeat collective determination. The Allies destroyed the Tigers because they feared what they represented. And in destroying them, they ensured the legend would never die. Modern efforts to locate Tigers continue. Occasionally, a wreck is discovered in a forest, pulled from a riverbed, excavated from a construction site. Each find generates significant interest. Even tanks too damaged for restoration have historical value. These discoveries remind us how quickly even the most formidable machines can vanish, and how the post-war world reshaped the legacy of German armor. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe. 1,800 tanks built. Fewer than 20 survive. The rest became steel for bridges, buildings, railways. The machines that terrorized Europe helped rebuild it. And the Tiger that Allied soldiers feared became the Tiger that historians treasure. That's the story of what happened to Germany's most legendary tank. But there's another German weapon whose post-war fate was even more dramatic. The Panther. Germany's most numerous heavy tank. Captured by every Allied power. Some of them fought again. Under different flags. Against different enemies. That story is coming next. This is History of World War II. See you in the next one.